Hey guys, tonight we're going back way back to the bustling streets of ancient Chang'an, the Tang Dynasty's glittering capital. You're not a noble, not a general, not even a scholar. Nope, you're something even more essential. A tea merchant. The empire runs on tea, and today, so do you. Imagine waking before dawn, incense curling through the rafters, wooden shutters creaking open to a city already murmuring with life. Your stall is nestled in the Eastern market, surrounded by vendors selling everything from silk to dried fish. You blink against the candlelight, already calculating how much boiling water you'll need and whether the tax inspector will be early again. You probably won't survive this job. By the way, your back aches, your fingers are stained with tannins, and every noble customer thinks their tea needs exactly 12 seconds of steeping. But it's home, and the aroma of roasted oolong is better than any rooster's alarm clock dot, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, drop a comment with your city and the time you're tuning in. I love seeing the global bedtime map unfold. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stir awake. Before sunrise, your futon still warm beneath you as the faint scent of cedarwood incense tells you the house next door has beaten you to it. The street outside is hushed, save for the occasional cough of a rooster or the clink of a cart's wheels on cobblestones. You roll over, squint at the paper screens filtering in the morning light, and stretch with a groan that echoes more than it should dot. No time to dawdle. You're a tea merchant, and the Eastern market waits for no one, not even sleepy you. You fumble into your robe, one sleeve inside out, and splash icy water on your face from a ceramic basin. The cold hits hard, but it clears your head. You mutter a sleepy mantra, don't burn the first pot. You always burn the first pot. Your stall isn't for a 10-minute walk if you don't stop for buns, which you do because breakfast buns with pickled plum are your only true joy. The streets are just waking up, swept clean by teenagers with straw brooms and early shopkeepers hauling crates of spices, bolts of silk, and baskets of what you hope is produce. One old man has a string of garlic around his neck. Fashion forward, your stall stands in a neat row of others, right between a woman who sells handmade combs and a suspiciously well-dressed tofu vendor. You nod to them both as you unlock the side panels and begin unfolding your setup. First, the folding table. Then, the copper kettle polish just enough to reflect a lopsided version of your face. Then the tea tins. Dozens of them, labeled in your own messy shorthand. F.R. Hill, Buddha Smoke, Dry Plum 3, you know what each means. Mostly dot one by one, you lift the lids and sniff. Earthy puer, delicate jasmine. A batch of oolong that smells faintly like roasted chestnuts. And regret. You arrange them with care, lining them up like tiny soldiers of serenity. The market is filling now, footsteps, voices, the call of the melon seller who never stops shouting. Even when no one's around, you pause and look around, soaking it in, Chang'an and fully on. 700,000 people behind these walls. A city that dreams in 10 languages and smells like 10,000 things: perfume, hot oil, horse dung, sandalwood, and right now, a breeze carrying distant temple bells. Historians still argue whether Chang'an was truly the largest city in the world at the time, but when you're standing in it, heart racing from pre-dawn prep, it certainly feels like the center of everything. Your first customer of the day is always the same, an elderly monk with eyebrows longer than his fingers. He doesn't say much, just raises one finger and, oolong. No sugar, water just underboiling, serve it in the green glazed cup he likes. He sips slowly, with a sigh that seems to deflate your entire stall. You love him for that. He pays with exact change and disappears into the haze like a ghost. One day he'll just vanish mid-sip and you'll have to pretend not to be devastated. While the kettle simmers again, you sweep the stall floor, catching yesterday's wind-blown leaves and what looks suspiciously like someone's hair ornament. Your broom is half broken, but the new ones are pricey and honestly, you've gotten attached. It squeaks like a squirrel when you sweep left. You glance toward the tofu vendor. She's already sold out. How? You resolve to be faster tomorrow, knowing full well you won't be. You're about to take your first real sip of tea when you hear it. The rooster again. This time closer and louder and definitely not a rooster. It's your neighbor's youngest. Son pretending again. You consider charging him 1 copper for every crow. Breeze stirs your hanging scroll. The one with that crooked calligraphy that's supposed to read harmony through leaf and water. A traveling poet once said, it actually reads wet leaf business. You kept it anyway, quirky? Maybe, but it keeps the tourists curious. You duck behind your stall just as the sun peeks over the tiled rooftops of Chang'an, flooding the eastern market with that sharp gold light that makes everything look twice as clean as it really is. This is your cue, the real start of your broader day. The warm-up act is over. Now it's time to prepare the stall like you mean it. First kettles. You own 3. One is copper and temperamental. The other is iron and steady as your grandfather's stories. The third, ceramic, cracked, and used strictly for show because it's painted with plum blossoms and people assume you know what you're doing if your equipment has floral motifs. You line them up on your brazier stand, one for boiling, one for steeping, one to look pretty. As you light the charcoal underneath the iron kettle, the first wisps of smoke curl up into the morning air, mingling with the clatter of other stalls. Unlocking for the day, you wipe down the lacquered counters with a cloth that smells faintly of orange peel and mildew. The wood beneath gleams in that irregular way that only hand-rubbed polish ever achieves, parts of it deeply rich, other patches stubbornly dull. You've meant to revarnish for about 2 years. You never will dot from beneath your table. You retrieve. The tea bricks. Compressed cakes of fermented leaves wrapped in thick paper. You hold one up to the light like a jeweler might inspect a ruby. It's heavy. It smells like the forest floor after rain. You gently unwrap it, watching flecks of dried leaf tumble out like tiny paper shavings. Tea was currency once, remember? People used to trade it the way we now toss coins at beggars. Even today, the finer bricks from Yunnan or Sichuan are valuable enough that a crooked merchant might try to pass off shredded bark mixed with mint. You've fallen for that once. Never again dot as the iron kettle begins to hum. You consider which. Blend to place front and center. Presentation is half the work. Customers may say they come for the taste, but what they really want is a story. You choose your limited run osmanthus blend and arrange the leaves in a shallow porcelain bowl. Shaped like a lotus, it's subtle, floral, and expensive enough to make them hesitate just long enough to feel like they're making a refined choice. Historians still argue whether Tang-era merchants practice what modern marketers would call brand identity, but as you adjust your bamboo display racks to face the angle of the sun just so you know you're doing exactly that dot by now, the street noise has shifted. No longer the hesitant cough of early morning, but the confident chatter of money about to be spent. Your regulars aren't far off. You arrange the sample cups, tiny, handle-less ceramic things that force a person to sip slowly. You learned that trick from an old merchant in Luoyang. He said the smaller the cup, the longer the conversation, and the longer the conversation, the more tea you sell. You never forgot that. A quick check beneath the stall. Water jars full, spare firewood. Stacked emergency tin of stale jasmine for obnoxious customers' trek. The stall is ready dot just in time too. Because here she comes your neighbor from the lacquerware stall. Already waving a coin and asking if you're out of the strong one, you hand her your smoky pour without a word. She grins, sniffs, and nods, just like heartbreak. She says, "You're not sure if that's a compliment." And then there's the moment, every morning, that always hits the same, the first real sip. You pour yourself a cup, this time a roasted green, and lift it to your lips. The steam fogs your face. The taste is all roasted chestnut and burnt grass and something faintly like pine. It settles into your belly like a warm rock. Everything slows down for exactly 3 seconds until your cousin appears. "Hey," he says far too loud. "Is the kettle clean today, or are we gambling again?" You don't respond. He knows better. He grabs a cup anyway, makes a face like he's tasting vinegar, and sits down on your crate of napkins. You'll deal with him later. For now, you're eyeing the third kettle. The fancy one. It's chipped on the spout, but you think today might be the day you finally dare to use it in front of customers. But only if no one orders that ridiculous almond milk blend again. It clogs the spout. Suddenly, a wind kicks up a strong gust, funneling through the market. Half your display labels scatter like dry leaves. You leap to catch the one for your rare Korean import. Too late. It's already being trampled by a scholar in wooden clogs, who doesn't even pause to apologize. Typical, quirky fact, in certain regions of the Tang Empire, wind was considered a kind of spiritual messenger. Today you decide it's a rude one. Still, you've survived the setup. The kettles are bubbling gently, the air smells like heaven, and you haven't spilled anything important yet. You lean against your tea shelf, hands warm from the brazier, and look out at the growing tide of Changyans. Foot traffic dot, it's almost time for the first rush, and that almond blend, already on someone's lips. You hear the footsteps before you see them, soft, rhythmic, and deliberate. The morning crowd is here. Some say it's a wave. You know better. It's a parade of personalities, rituals, and very picky palates. Your first real customer today is an elderly scholar who always asks for the same thing, whatever tastes like lost wisdom. You hand him a cup of aged pu'er and pretend not to roll your eyes. He closes his, inhales deeply, and nods like you just quoted Confucius. "Yes," he says, "this tastes like regret." Behind him, a pair of middle-aged women squabble over which of your teas reduces inner fire. One wants chrysanthemum, the other insists on lotus leaf. You pour both and let them accidentally mix in the same cup. They don't notice. You call it your harmony blend. They'll be back tomorrow. The flow of customers doesn't stop. A teenage student in blue robes wants something to keep him awake through calligraphy class. You give him a white tea spiked with a pinch of ginseng. A nervous-looking clerk from the Ministry of Rights asks for something calming. You pretend not to hear the quiver in his voice as you hand him a floral oolong. A traveling monk passes through, eyes the kettle, and simply bows before moving on. You wonder how far he's walked. You wonder what he saw. Historians still argue whether tea in Tang society was more a medicinal ritual or a social lubricant. But when you're knee-deep in customers asking for both digestion help and good gossip, you stop caring what the scrolls say and just keep pouring. A hush falls as a tall, serious-looking official stops in front of your stall. He's the kind that makes everyone else suddenly remember urgent errands in the opposite direction. His robe is crisp, his boots polished. He scans your selection, picks up a tin, sniffs, raises an eyebrow. "Do you store these in a dry place?" You smile politely. "Only the driest." Guarded by a rooster, blessed by 2 priests. A pause, and then he chuckles. A tiny, fragile thing, but it's there. You pour him a tiny cup of dark oolong. He drinks. He nods. He moves on. You exhale. Only then do you realize you've been holding your breath. One of your favorite customers. Arrives next, a monk in training who always forgets his coin purse but tells the best stories. Today, he trades a bowl of rice crackers for a cup of jasmine tea. As he sips, he leans in conspiratorially. Did you hear about the magistrate's cousin who mistook cinnamon bark for firewood? You haven't, but now you need to. He leans in and recounts the tale in vivid, if questionably accurate, detail. You're laughing too hard to notice that your kettle's boiled dry again. You refill it quickly and vow, again, to pay better attention. Fringe fact, in some circles, people believed boiling water too long could offend tea spirits. You're not superstitious, but you mutter a quick apology just in case stopped by mid-morning. Your corner of the market has turned into a sort of informal salon. Nobles, monks, and dusty travelers sip slowly and watch the passers-by. The tofu vendor throws you a glance that says she's jealous of your seating area. You throw one back that says, buy a kettle then? The regulars have developed a rhythm. Sip, gossip, sip, laugh, occasionally sigh wistfully into their cups. One man swears his ex-wife only married him for his tea supply. You don't ask if she kept the good tins in the divorce some mornings. You wonder what it would be like to sell something less fragile. Shoes, maybe. Or stone carvings. Something that doesn't burn, break, or it requires 7 different temperature stages. But then someone takes their first sip, sighs like they just saw the sunrise inside a cup, and you remember why you're still here. There's one particularly awkward moment when a very serious-looking young woman insists on buying the most masculine tea you offer. You're stumped. Tea is leaves, not swords. You hand her a smoky lapsang souchong and make up a story about warriors drinking it before battle. She nods solemnly. Success. You watch the steam curl from your newest kettle, this one borrowed from your cousin and somehow still stained with what you hope is only mulberry wine. The shape of the spout affects the pour, which affects the steep, which affects everything. This kettle leans slightly left, giving every pour a wobbly, unpredictable charm. Customers seem to love it. Behind you, the scroll flaps again in the breeze. Wet leaf business indeed. The market is at full tilt now. A music vendor down the way starts playing a Gukin melody so slow it makes your eyelids feel heavier. The smell of frying dumplings wafts over, and someone's goat is chewing on a tax notice nailed to a nearby post. You think about warning someone. Yidom single quotes teed out one last customer strolls up before the lunch crowd hits a young scholar with ink on his fingers and exhaustion in his eyes. I need something to help me write poetry, he says. You hand him a cup of tea guanyan and smile. Don't blame the tea, you tell him, if the poem turns out awful. He grins. You both know. It probably will. You're wiping stray tea leaves from the counter and wondering whether the roasted barley blend is a loss, 'cause when you hear it, that distinct, rhythmic clack of wooden sandals and a cough that's somehow both polite and judgmental. The tax collector has arrived. You look up and there he is, just as punctual as mold in a summer rainstorm. His robes are pressed, his scrolls are crisp, and his face is exactly as cheerful as a man paid to collect money without spending any. He clears his throat. You pretend not to notice. Oh, you say at last, smiling the smile of someone who definitely did not fudge a decimal in last week's ledger. You're early. He glances at the sundial in his hand. Yes, he carries his own and frowns. I'm 7 minutes behind schedule. Of course he is. You reach under your counter, past the emergency spoon stash and the terrifyingly strong fermented goji berries, and pull out your tax ledger. He snatches it with the reverence of a scholar handling sacred scrolls. You resist the urge to hum a funeral dirge dot as he flips through the pages. You busy yourself with refilling the kettles. One whistling, one simmering, one judging you silently from its chipped spout. You pour yourself a small cup of green tea, calming, cleansing, probably not strong enough for this encounter. He pauses on one entry. Tea gift one tail to anonymous monastery benefactor. You nod solemnly. They insisted on anonymity. Very spiritual. Was this the same monastery that sent you back a basket of fried eels? Possibly. Who's to say where eels come from, really? Historians still argue whether Tang Dynasty tax collectors were more feared or simply loathed, but in your experience, they're mostly tired. This one sighs, scribbles something, and moves on to Inspector Scales. You offer him a complimentary cup of chrysanthemum tea. He declines. I don't drink on the job. I don't either, you say, sipping meaningfully. Eventually, after 20 minutes of silent scrutiny, 3 throat clearings, and one moment where he very nearly knocks over your best tin of white peony, he rolls up his scroll and nods. May continue trading. Oh, thank you, great official of ledgers and shadows. He blinks. Is that sarcasm? Absolutely not. You give him your best innocent merchant face, the one with just enough squint to suggest humble respect, but not so much that it looks like you're mocking his hat. He leaves without another word, sandals clacking a steady beat into the crowd. Exhale. Immediately, your cousin pops out from behind a barrel of dried hawthorn slices. Did you bribe him with eel again? Shut up and fetch more firewood. Back at the counter, you examine the damage. A few tins out of place, a slight chip on the glaze of your favorite tasting cup. Was that already there? And your ledger page a little too smudged for your liking? Still disaster averted. Barely. Just then, a customer walks up, unnervous looking, man with ink stains on his collar and the posture of someone who's lost a very expensive bet. He glances around before leaning in. Do you sell anything that tastes like confidence? You blink. I can offer something that smells like confidence. After that, it's up to your decisions. He takes the jasmine sandalwood blend and sips it like it might insult him. Then he smiles. You watch his shoulders relax. Maybe that's all it takes. Some steam, some scent, and a little time pretending you're not about to be audited. Another customer approaches. You know this one? Well, a noble woman who always orders 2 cups, then drinks them both herself while pretending to wait for a friend. She sits on your rickety bench, adjusts her hairpin, and waves off your menu with a flick. Surprise me, she says. As she always does, you pour her a smoky red tea and garnish it with a single dried rose petal. She nods. Dramatic. I approve. She takes a slow sip and sighs, watching the market bustle past. You follow her gaze. Children chasing a hoop down the street, a peddler yelling about medicinal mushrooms, a dog wearing a silk ribbon for reasons unknown. It's a weirdly beautiful city. Loud, complicated, always on the verge of flooding or catching fire, and yet here you are, 1 cup at a time. One boiling kettle after another. Fringe fact. Some Tang officials were paid partly in bricks of tea. Not the kind you drink now. The dense, bitter kind, used more as barter than beverage. You've tasted it once. You haven't forgotten. You never will. Back at your stall, a cat hops up and immediately curls around your feet. You don't own a cat. No one does. But this one's been around for weeks, showing up just in time for the tax collector and disappearing when actual affection is required. You call him Minister Meow. Minister Meow steals a piece of dried persimmon from the counter. You pretend not to see Dot somewhere down the row. A vendor drops a stack of ceramic bowls. The crash startles everyone except the cat. Minister Meow does not care. He just glares at you and steals another persimmon chunk. You shrug. Fine, but that's coming out of your pay. He yawns. You settle back on your stool, legs crossed, watching steam rise from your newest blend. You've survived the morning. Tax inspection. Your stall is in one piece. The cat hasn't knocked over your samples yet. There's still a long day ahead, and, the next rush will bring more oddities, more demands, and probably a poem duel or two. But for now, the Kettles bubble, the street hums, and your ledgers miraculously balance. The morning trade fades gently into late morning chatter, the moment when the rush of business softens and people linger, pretending they don't have other things to do. This is your favorite part of the day. The tea flows more slowly, the gossip starts to steep, and the city starts telling stories. You're refilling a pot of chrysanthemum tea when you hear the clatter of sandals and a familiar laugh. It's old Ren, the neighborhood scroll painter, with ink-stained sleeves and a head full of other people's secrets. He shuffles up to the counter and gives you a grin that suggests trouble. Did you hear about the general's daughter? He whispers, ran off with a lute player. From Shanxi, no less. You raise an eyebrow. Are we judging her for the lute or the province? Both. A few regulars chuckle, and just like that, the morning transforms into a full-blown tea. Gossip circle. They don't call it a market, you think? They call it a stage. The tofu vendor leans over from her stall. The matchmaker's nephew got caught using a love spell scroll. It backfired. He's now engaged to a merchant's goat. You cough. An actual goat? He's not correcting anyone? The noblewoman from earlier perks up. He should have. Just brewed safflower tea. Everyone knows that's safer. You know for a fact safflower does absolutely nothing for romantic success, but in this moment, you're not a tea merchant. You're a gossip conduit, a curator of overheard misfortune. You decide not to correct anyone. Historians still argue whether tea culture in the Tang Dynasty truly shaped social spaces, or whether it merely reflected them. But right now, as your stall hosts 6 patrons and 3 conversations about failed love spells, banned poems, and a suspiciously smooth-talking silk dealer, it's clear this isn't just about the tea dot, it's about belonging. A younger customer barely out of boyhood, with a nervous energy and ink marks on his knuckles leans in. Is it true, he asks, that Lady Wei, the poetess, once slapped a prince with a fan at a tea house? You consider. Depends. Do you want it to be true? He nods, eyes wide. Then yes. And she did it while reciting a verse about plum? Blossoms, he beams. Somewhere across the city, Lady Wei's legacy just gained a new detail. The gossip weaves in and out of your stall, like smoke flavored with exaggeration, spiced with speculation. You do your best to keep up, refilling cups, adding a drop of honey here, a sliver of candied ginger there. Someone suggests the Minister of Rights has a secret second family in Luoyang. Someone else counters that he doesn't even have time for one family, let alone 2. Fringe tidbit. There were rumors in the imperial court that certain tea houses were actually spy hubs, places where conversations were recorded in ink by hidden scribes. You look around your modest stall and wonder if Minister Meow is taking notes. The cat, perched now on your accounting ledgers, blinks slowly and flicks his tail. Meanwhile, your cousin returns from his mysterious walk, smelling suspiciously. Like roasted duck. He leans over and steals a piece of candied kumquat off the sample plate. Miss anything? He mumbles. You gesture at the crowd. Just the collapse of at least 2 marriages and possibly the birth of a goat dynasty. He nods as if this is normal. Your regulars come and go, but the mood stays light, tinged with lazy laughter and the soft chime of someone's wind bell strung overhead. The lacquerware vendor offers up a tale about a teacup that predicted the future. You counter with your own story, possibly invented on the spot, about a kettle that only boiled when told a riddle. Someone suggests holding a tea storytelling night. Someone else declares they've been cursed by a tea leaf shaped like their ex. You make a note. Start charging for the weird leaves. You brew a pot of your lighter green blend, letting the leaves swirl slowly in the clear glass pot. People watch the dance of them, quieting slightly. The mood softens. Sometimes the tea does the talking. Sometimes it knows when to hush. At the edge of your stall, Two poets sit in silence, scrawling verses on scraps of parchment. Every few minutes, one of them mumbles something about moonlight or longing. The other nods, sips tea, and adds a line. You don't ask. You just keep their cups full, and somewhere behind it all, the soft hum of the city carries on, the clang of a blacksmith down the lane, the jingle of a street performer's bells, the call of someone selling spicy grilled yams. You glance at the clock tower's shadow stretching across the square. Almost midday. Soon the stall will swell with the midday snack rush, and the brief lull of gossip will give way to food crumbs and slosh tea and customers too hungry to care about goat gossip. But for now, your stall is more than a business. It's a moment suspended in steam. You sip your own tea cool now, faintly bitter from oversteeping, and listen to someone describe the scent of betrayal as like overbrewed chrysanthemum with a hint of sandalwood. You decide you'll use that in your next blend. You don't hear the shift, you feel it. That subtle tremor in the rhythm of the street. The breeze thickens with oil and spice. The voices get louder, more purposeful. Somewhere, someone's drumming on a bucket. It's midday, which means it's time for tea's greatest trial, the snack rush. You brace yourself. You adjust the lids on your jars, wipe down the counter again for all the good it'll do, and make sure your tray of sample cups is at least semi-aligned. You call this your illusion of control. It helps. Within minutes, your stall is surrounded. A scholar with half-buttoned robes is first. He mumbles, "Need something to go with dried squid." You give him a strong oolong and pretend that's normal. Next comes a young noble who talks entirely too loudly about his personal chef's failings. He can't even balance bitter and sweet. He exclaims as he dunks a chunk of candied ginger into your jasmine green without permission. You flinch. You let it go. You always let it go. Then come the snackers, half the market's population. It seems holding mysterious bundles wrapped in lotus leaves or bits of deep-fried dough shaped like animals. They're not really here for tea. They're here to sit, chew, and talk with their mouths full. And you're suddenly a waiter, a referee, and a plate balancer all in one. A merchant demands chrysanthemum tea with crushed plum. For digestion, he insists. You crush the plum with your tiny brass pestle, resisting the urge to say, you could just chew slower. One woman appears carrying a miniature dog in her sleeve. She orders 3 cups, one for her friend, and one for Little General. You hesitate. She stares. You pour the dog's tea into a doll-sized bowl. It sneezes. Meanwhile, someone's child is swinging from your wind chime. You gently nudge them off with a chopstick. Historians still argue whether Tang tea houses functioned as proto-cafes or proto-chaos, but you're firmly in the chaos camp right now. Your cousin reappears, smelling like dumplings. Want one? I'm working. He shrugs, pops one in his mouth, and sits on your clean napkin stack. A food vendor sets up next to you, selling hot sesame flatbreads. The scent is maddening. Your customers now all demand something bready. With their tea, you don't have anything bready. You give someone dried persimmon slices, they frown. Not the same. No, it is not the same, but also, do you see a brick oven under this counter? A monk arrives with an enormous jar of pickled bamboo shoots and offers to trade a handful for a cup of mint tea. You agree, instantly regret it, and then offer the bamboo to your cousin, who eats it without blinking. You decide he might be unkillable. Midway through pouring a cup of red tea, someone elbows your brazier. The pot wobbles. You freeze, but the spout steadies. The kettle leans a little but holds its pour. You exhale. Minister Meow, perched dangerously close to a teacup stack, yawns with disdain at your panicked fringe fact. Tang Dynasty snacks were wonderfully bizarre people stuffed glutinous rice cakes with sweet bean paste and spiced lamb. You once tried that flavor combination in tea form. Once. There's a brief moment of glory when you successfully balance 4 sample cups, a pot of boiling water, and a dish of sugared lotus seeds while answering a question about court poetry. You're a legend in your own stall. No one claps. That's fine. The noblewoman from earlier returns, this time wielding a candied crab claw. Will this pair with white tea? You stare at the claw, then you stare at her. Only if we pretend it's an artistic metaphor. She smiles. Perfect. You pour the white tea. Somewhere behind the stall, the tofu vendor is laughing so hard she snorts. Again, you'll never hear the end of that dot the snack rush peaks when a group of traveling performers plop down in front of your stall, balancing. Trays of meat skewers and sweet buns on their knees. They ask if you'll do a theatrical pour. You roll your eyes, but oblige lifting the kettle high and pouring a perfect ribbon into their cups. Applause. Real, actual applause. You pretend it happens all the time. A few crumbs later, one of them starts humming a Tang opera melody. Someone joins in. Someone claps to the beat with chopsticks. The noblewoman hums through her crab claw. Minister Meow purrs. You pour. It's madness. It's joy. And it smells like ginger, caramel, mint, and roasted barley. As quickly as it began, it ebbs. The crowd dissipates. Plates empty, crumbs settle. You wipe a smear of honey off your sleeve and wonder what just happened. You glance at your supply tins, half are low. One is empty. Your special osmanthus? Gone. You stare at the spot where it once stood and whisper, you were loved. The market continues around you, but for the first time in an hour, your stall is still. A single remaining cup sits on the counter forgotten, half full. Cooling. You sip it. Somehow it's perfect. The lull doesn't last. You've barely rinsed the last cup when you hear it. The exaggerated clearing of a throat, the kind that begs for attention. You look up to see 2 of your most frequent patrons, both perched stiffly on opposite stools, like statues carved out of overcooked rice. The tension between them is immediate, obvious, and vaguely theatrical. It's Sue the ink merchant and B.O. the retired tax clerk. Longtime tea sippers, lifetime rivals, frenemies with a flair for drama. They never outright argue, oh no, that would be uncouth. What they do instead is worse. They battle with metaphors, allegories, and increasingly obscure Tang poetry. And today, they've come prepared, I suppose, Sue says loudly. Some tea merchants believe strength lies in the bitterness of brew, when in fact, true elegance whispers in the aroma. He takes a deliberate sip of your silver needle white tea, eyes B.O. with the subtlety of a parade dragon. B.O. doesn't even blink. He lifts his cup of roasted oolong with the reverence of a monk. And yet, even the whisper of elegance requires a spine, or it dissolves into water like the memories of a forgotten dynasty. You sigh. Here we go again. They've done this before. You usually just refill their cups and let them roast each. Other like chestnuts over an indirect flame. But today, you sense escalation. There's something sharper in the air. Maybe it's the ginseng. Tea, Sue declares, is a mirror of the soul. Cloudy tea, cloudy mind. B.O. chuckles. And I suppose that explains your choice of trousers, gasps from no one. It's just you and Minister Meow, who blinks, unimpressed. Historians still debate whether Tang tea houses fostered real philosophical dialogue, or just gave bored men a socially acceptable place to flirt with metaphors. You, personally, lean toward the latter. Sue slams a tiny porcelain cup down gently, but with intent. I propose a contest, he says, eyes gleaming, a duel of words. To be judged fairly and without bias. You freeze. You are the only available human in range. You also have a bamboo spoon in hand. They both turn to you. You are the judge now. You are so tired. Fine. You mutter, placing the spoon on the counter like a gavel. 3 rounds, 1 topic, no rewrites. The topic, Bio says, shall be, which of us makes better tea? You raise a brow. You don't make tea. I make tea. Exactly, Sue says smugly. And reinterpret your arc. You think about pretending you don't speak Tang dialect. But it's too late. They're already scribbling verses on scraps of paper with wild brushstrokes. Round 1 begins. Sue reads. His piece like a performance at the emperor's court. Within the cup, a golden hue as noble as a morning dew. Yet clumsy hands have boiled too long. The sin is right, the taste is wrong. He bows. Bio snorts. An amateur's flourish, he mutters, then unrolls his parchment. From leaves once kissed by mountain breath, a bitter truth resists its death, but skillful hands in boiling light reveal the calm before the night. You nod politely, pretending to understand half of it. Minister Meow sneezes. You call it a tie. They grumble. Round 2. The subject. Temperature control. This time they get creative. Sue uses a metaphor about a jealous lover. Bio compares water to military discipline. It's a lot. You announce that Minister Meow will judge round 2. The cat walks away. You declare Bio the winner, based on whisker proximity. Now it's the final round. Freestyle, Sue composes a haiku. Bio responds with a limerick. You award a bonus point for rhyme. Sue accuses you of anti-Confucian bias. You threaten to stop serving tea entirely. They both apologize. Immediately, the poetry duel ends with a tense handshake and a promise to meet again on the battlefield of flavor. You have no idea what that means. As they shuffle off, still muttering about metaphors, your cousin pokes his head in again. That sounded intense, he says, nibbling a radish. You win? No one wins, you reply, resting your forehead against the counter. Only tea. Fringe fact, Tang elite often wrote spontaneous poetry in social settings, usually while drinking sometimes tea, sometimes not tea, and sometimes, if you believe certain scrolls, while naked. You pray that trend doesn't return. Later, a young student wanders by, asking if the commotion was some kind of official exam. You shake your head. No, you say. Just 2 men who think they invented adjectives. Still, something about it lingers. The way they poured words into the air with such intensity over your tea. You can't help but feel slightly honored. Or maybe just amused. You pour yourself a fresh cup and sip in silence. No verses. No metaphors. Just warmth, aroma, and a soft cat purring beneath the bench. Afternoon shadows stretch across the alley as the sun shifts toward the western walls of Chang'an. Your feet ache, your teapot is down to dregs, and Minister Meow has curled into a perfect circle atop the receipt ledger. It should be your rest. Period. But of course, it is in single quotes T. because here comes Lin, the ever-grinning errand boy from the Orchid Pavilion, prancing into your stall like he's got silk moths in his sandals. He waves a red lacquered chit with a flourish. The lady asks for her usual, he chirps, plus 2 extra cups for her guests. Also, she wants it warm, not hot, and with the petals arranged more whimsically this time. You blink slowly. Tell the lady, you say, that whimsy costs 2 coins more. He grins again and flips you a 3rd coin before dashing off with a speed only someone unbothered by bureaucracy can muster. Now begins the ritual of the parlor. Delivery your most delicate order of the week. The recipient, Madame Z, famed courtesan, poetry patron, and possibly a spy for someone, though no one agrees who. She insists your jasmine oolong blend is the only drinkable thing east of the Luo River. You suspect flattery, but coin is coin. And besides, it is a pretty blend. You'd carefully pack the tea service, 3 Celadon cups, a narrow-spouted pot, dried lychee slices, and exactly 7 chrysanthemum petals, for luck or aesthetics, you've never asked. Everything balances on a red lacquered tray, which you carry like it's the last egg in the empire. The walk to Madame Zi's parlor takes you down narrow lanes behind the market alleys that smell of spice, ink, and old rain. You dodge a haphazard butcher's stand, a sleeping guard dog, and an amateur musician plucking heartbreak on a stringed instrument that has clearly seen better centuries. A group of kids starts by chasing a kite made of old grain paper. One stops to ask if you're selling candy. You point at the tray, just leaves and hot water. Yuck, she says, and runs off. You arrive at the pavilion gate, where two doormen are debating whether foxes can climb trees. They stop long, enough to let you through. Inside, everything changes. The light filters through silk curtains, scented oil floats through the air, and a pipa player strums softly from somewhere unseen. Madame Zi is reclining like a well-paid cat, draped in lavender. Silk, flanked by two guests who immediately start whispering the moment they see you. You don't take it personally. You're used to being the delivery person and the entertainment. She lifts one painted brow. Is that chrysanthemum and lychee I detect? You bow, with a hint of osmanthus. Ooh, chicose, poetic. You. Pour her cup first, then the guests. They nod, trying to appear like they're not evaluating you as a potential son-in-law, political liability, or both. I heard, Madame Zi says, sipping delicately, that Sue and Bio had a poetry skirmish. At your stall today, you try to play it cool. They nearly came to blows over rhyming structure. She claps her hands with delight. I love when men argue with couplets, so vulnerable. One of the guests mutters something about intellectual foreplay. You pretend to have gone deaf. Madame Zi waves a hand, and Lynn emerges from behind. A screen with a folding fan and a tray of candied lotus root. You're briefly jealous he gets the easy gig, then comes the moment of truth. She takes a long sip of your tea, pauses. You hold your breath. This, she says, is just the right temperature. Perfectly whimsical petals, too. You may leave the tray returned tomorrow for it. That's her version of a 5-star review. You bow again, trying not to show relief, and back out of the parlor before anyone asks for impromptu haiku. Back on the street, the city feels louder, more chaotic. Chang'an in the afternoon is a living. Beestocks carts groan, children shriek with joy or minor injury, and vendors hawk everything from goose eggs to faux immortality tonics. It's crowded, colorful, and smells like fish sauce and poetry sweat. As you edge back toward your stall, a passing scholar stops you. Is that lacquer tray yours? He asks, eyeing it. No, you say. I just carry it like I'm in love with it. He nods thoughtfully, as if that's profound. Fringe fact. Courtesans in the Tang Dynasty were often far more educated than their noble patrons, and many wielded enormous cultural influence. Some even curated salons of poetry and philosophy, shaping the intellectual currents of the age all, while sipping tea and making people nervous with a smile. By the time you reach your corner, Minister Meow is still snoring, and someone has stolen your bench. Again, you collapse onto a crate and pour yourself whatever's left in the pot lukewarm, slightly oversteeped and utterly perfect, because you're not Madame Zi. You're not a poet. You're a merchant, and this is your favorite blend. Your break doesn't last. Just as you finish your last sip of lukewarm jasmine, a deep rattle rolls through your chest, the distinctive groan of the market's brass water gong. Oh, no. You glance at your pot. Empty. The dreaded chore calls. A refill. From the spring, Isai stand and gently nudge Minister Meow off the receipt ledger. He mumbles something feline and indignant before curling into your spot. You envy his career path deeply. Grabbing your wooden yoke, you hug the twin copper kettles to either end. Your shoulders already feel sore just looking at them, but there's no choice. Tea merchants live and die by their water, And while you technically could boil tap water from the neighborhood well, that would be like making soup with bath water. Scandalous dot, so off you go. You push past the stalls of garlic sellers, scroll anchors, and one particularly aggressive woman selling fermented tofu. The crowd thins as you exit the main market and slip into the outer lanes of the city, a half-wild zone where carts creak. Roosters wander free, and someone is always arguing about turnips. The spring lies near the edge of Chang'an's southeastern wall, tucked beneath a shady copse of bamboo. Locals call it Moon-Eyed Spring, supposedly because of the faint blue shimmer that dances over its surface when the moon is high. You've never seen it, you're always here when the sun is blaring, but you like the name. The path to its slopes. Gently downward, your sandals crunching over gravel, your kettles bouncing with each step. A storyteller once claimed the Tang court's imperial cooks used this spring for their chrysanthemum broths. Another swore it cured insomnia and taxes. You'd settle for it not giving you the runs dot as you approach, though. Your stomach drops. The water is muddy, cloudy, with a faint brownish tint. You squat by the edge and dip a testing finger. Still cool, but not clear. You squint at the trees. No broken branches, no signs of animals. But something's clearly stirred the sediment, a pair of older. Women nearby are filling jugs and muttering about kids swimming again. You consider asking them if it's safe, but one is giving the other a dramatic reenactment of her daughter-in-law's cooking, and you wisely opt out. You crouch, filling the first kettle slowly, watching the silt settle. It's not ideal, but boiling. Should kill most things, probably. Hopefully dot as you wait. You reflect on the strange reverence Tang merchants have for water. Some tea houses in Chang'an claim their brew is superior because they only use water from mountain mist caught in silk cloths. Others swear by rainwater aged in ceramic jars. One eccentric merchant you once met boasted of collecting snowmelt from the Himalayas, which seems excessive unless you have very small cups and a large donkey. Historians still argue whether such practices were actual health concerns, symbolic gestures, or just really good marketing. Some say the Tang obsession with purity was linked to Buddhist influence, clean water, clean spirit. Others think it was just about outsnobbing your competitors. You carry the filled kettles back to your stall, arms stretched, sweat building. Under your tunic, one of the city's trash collectors, a wiry old man with a single tooth and a four-wheeled cart, calls out, "Got your mud special again?" You grin. Adds flavor and mystery. He nods solemnly. Mystery tastes like frogs. Back at the stall, the market has thickened with its late afternoon buzz. The alley's smells have shifted from grilled morning dumplings to fried shallots and vinegar. Kids are playing shuttlecock between stalls, occasionally whacking it into someone's wares. At one point, it lands squarely in your empty bowl of lychee slices. Minister Meow eats it anyway. You stoke the brazier, setting your kettle to boil. Steam rises, familiar, comforting dot as you wipe down your counter. A customer approaches a bespectacled monk from the north, his robes still dusty. From the road, he studies your jars, then points at your pot. Spring water? He asks. You nod. Moon-eyed spring, fresh, almost definitely frog-free. He smiles faintly. That's more honest than most monks I've met. He stays for 2 cups and leaves. An extra coin. You feel forgiven. That night, as you tally the day's progress, you make a note. Tomorrow, you'll go earlier. Or bribe someone to bring you better water. Or maybe finally talk to that weird scholar who claims he can distill dew from dragon fruit leaves. He's probably mad, but so are most people in this trade. And yet, there's comfort in this endless loop of boiling, pouring, fetching, and steeping. It's predictable, like a well-worn robe or a well-trained cat. Quirky fact, some Tang tea masters claimed they could taste the emotion of the person who fetched the water, bitter if angry, they wrote. Sour, fearful, sweet if the soul is calm. You hope. Your water tastes like mild panic and a dash of sarcasm, because that's exactly how it feels today. Back in the heart of the Eastern market, the afternoon sun has shifted. Its golden rays now tilt at a dramatic slant, catching on the glazed tiles of nearby roofs and bouncing off brass kettles, polished brooch, and the sweat-slicked foreheads of desperate vendors. You, of course, are among them. This is evening market chaos, your most dreaded and most profitable time of day. Lanterns are being lit. Red paper globes flutter from stalls like drunken jellyfish. The scent of frying garlic, candied hawthorn, and something vaguely fermented wafts in thick, sticky layers. Somewhere nearby, someone is rhythmically clanging cymbals while yelling about medicinal ox bones. The crowd swells. Scholars wobble past, exhausted from debate and far too tipsy for their own good. Young courtesans in embroidered veils giggle beneath parasols. Peddlers chant their deals like lullabies. 3 copper for 5. 3 copper for 5. One small child seems to be trying to sell his pet cricket. You nod respectfully. Entrepreneurship starts young. Your stall, meanwhile, has turned into a battlefield. A scholar demands a specific blend you haven't stocked since last autumn. But I dreamed of it last night, he whines, eyes wild. A group of farmers all want barley tea and won't stop arguing about the ideal roast time. One insists on 23 seconds. Another swears by 44. You offer 33 as a compromise, and they nod like you've just solved. Confusion ethics. Then comes the street performer. A fire breather. You knew he'd be back. He always chooses the corner near your stall to dramatically spit flaming oil into the air, which is exactly where your decorative tea scrolls flutter peacefully in the breeze. You rush to roll them up before the third burst of flame. You're going to set my oolong on fire again. You shout. He bows apologetically, his eyebrows already singed from the last show. Customers scatter at each burst of flame, which means you must reset your queue every few minutes. You're considering bribing him with plum wine just to go annoy the tofu vendor instead. And speaking of annoyances, there's a goat. Yes, a goat. He doesn't belong to anyone you know. He's just ... here, chewing on a discarded invoice book with the terrifying calm of someone who knows no rules. You try to shoo him away with a ladle, but he simply eyes you and bleats with profound disinterest. Minister Meow from his perch makes eye contact with the goat in what feels like a telepathic threat. You'll let them settle it. Still, for all the chaos. This is also your richest window. The city is alive, electric, with food, gossip, music, and dusk. Nobles from the inner quarters often drift down in this hour, seeking street fare more exciting than their private kitchens can provide. They want the flavor of Chang'an's belly, and you, humble merchant that you are, offer them its warm, fragrant tea. A young man approaches next. Silk robes, silver-tipped fan, and that unmistakable air of inherited confidence. He lifts a brow, sniffs your kettle, and murmurs, "Any first flush dragonwell?" You resist the urge to roll your eyes. You do have it, barely half a pouch left, but now it's about playing the role. You squint at the horizon like you're pondering tides. Then you nod slowly. For you, I'll pour a half cup. The leaves came by camel. It's mostly true, though historians still argue whether the famed dragonwell varietals of the Tang era really match the delicate flavor profiles modern tea lovers obsess over. Some believe those early brews were stronger, more bitter, less refined. Others claim Tang connoisseurs were already deploying complex processing methods, steaming, sun-drying, even scenting leaves with osmanthus blossoms harvested before dawn. Whatever the truth, you steep the leaves just right. He sips. Eyes widen. He nods once, like you've passed a test. Then drops a jade coin in your tip jar and vanishes into the crowd. Moments later, A troupe of masked dancers flounces by, tossing flower petals and reciting poetry about clouds that fall in love with rivers. One of them accidentally kicks over your spare stool. You smile and pick it up. It's chaos, yes, but it's Tang Dynasty chaos. Rich with sounds, smells, clumsy dancers, difficult scholars, and tea rituals older than the road beneath your feet. You glance up at the twilight sky. A few stars begin to prick through the velvet blue. Your brazier crackles gently. A customer compliments your dried plum infusion. Another asks for something that tastes like melancholy but with a hint of citrus. You hand them a floral, oolong, and nod solemnly. Quirky fact of the hour: Tang-era tea vendors were known to hire poets to write mini odes on paper slips and attach them to their cups. Customers would sip and read lines like steamed leaves swirl like dreams in boiling. Moonlight. You've thought about bringing it back, but Minister Meow keeps sitting on the poetry basket dot as the last of the fire breather's smoke clears and the goat finally wanders off, chewing your old shopping list as a farewell. You settle back on your stool. Evening may be chaotic, but it's also proof you've survived another day in the market, and there's still tea left to pour. You're down to your last batch of steamed oolong, and you're just starting to unwind. The crowd has thinned to a manageable trickle. The goat is gone. The air has shifted cooler now, softer. Lanterns flicker instead of flare, and the sky above Chang'an is a perfect charcoal wash, pinpricked with stars. You hum quietly as you wipe down the counter. Minister Meow has curled into the basket of jasmine buds, one paw draped dramatically over his nose like a disapproving noblewoman. You're just reaching for the wooden slat to half close the stall when you hear the distinctive rhythm of sandals striking stone, not a scurry, not a shuffle, a purposefully rhythmic clack. You freeze, because you know what that sound means. The inspector is here. He's not your inspector. Technically, he's imperial. A mid-rank bureaucrat with delusions of grandeur and, more dangerously, a well-developed palate. He fancies himself a tea critic, which would be fine if he didn't show up unannounced, carrying his own porcelain tasting cup and a scroll labeled Notes, Vendors of Variable Competence. And here he comes now. Robes pressed, beard combed. That annoying little embroidered tassel swaying from his hat like it has opinions. Good evening. Tea merchant, he intones, voice sonorous and smug. You bow respectfully, of course. But inside, you're doing the opposite of a respectful bow. Inside, you're groaning. Just closing for the night, sir, you say. Hopeful. He raises one eyebrow. Perfect. I prefer my tastings post-chaos. Of course you do. You uncap the good kettle, think the spirits, it's still hot, and begin arranging a quick tasting lineup. You choose 3 safe bets: roasted barley, osmanthus-scented green, and a touch of white tea saved for emergencies like this. The inspector sits, pulls out a tiny jade scoop, and sniffs the leaves with a theatrical flair usually reserved for opera divas. He murmurs, hints of moss or wet sandals. You smile tightly. Spring Mountain Dew, perhaps? He grunts. While he sips and scribbles notes at an excruciating pace, you ponder just how subjective tea tasting has always been. Historians still argue whether Tang Dynasty officials like this one genuinely influenced tea culture or whether they were just freeloaders with scrolls. Some say their critiques helped refine brewing standards. Others believe their primary contribution was slowing vendors down with endless nitpicking. At least tonight, he seems calm. Until he reaches the second cup. The osmanthus is aggressive, he announces. Like a perfumed soldier. You blink. Should I water it down? No, he says dramatically. Let it challenge me. You honestly don't know if that's a compliment. He continues tasting. Time crawls. Minister Meow opens one. Ai assesses the situation and pointedly turns his back on the inspector. You wish you could do the same, Dot, but then finally, he leans back and lets out a satisfied sigh. You're improving, he concedes. You nod graciously. Your feedback is invaluable, as always. He waves a hand modestly. Next week, I'll bring my cousin. He's compiling a regional tea guide. Oh, joy. Dot still, when he rises and vanishes back into the dark, leaving behind a scribbled scroll and a single copper coin, stingy and smug. You can't help but breathe a little easier. Your shoulders relax. Your kettle whistles softly. You survived. The surprise visit, you didn't spill the tea, literally or figuratively, and you didn't tell him the osmosis batch was actually from last season. Dot. It's not that you're dishonest, it's just that tea doesn't care for bureaucracy. The best cups often come from the unexpected, a forgotten blend, a leaf that oxidized a moment too long, or a merchant who knows how to fake confidence when cornered. Dot. You stretch your legs. The sky is now fully night. A soft breeze rustles the nearby flags. You swear you can hear a flute somewhere, a single note, floating through the lanes like a half-forgotten memory. There's a reason tea. Merchants are rarely written about in grand epics. You don't conquer kingdoms. You don't duel on palace rooftops. Dot, but you do know how to survive a surprise inspection with grace, poise, and a kettle that hasn't boiled dry. And in Chang'an, that's worth more than a dozen swords. Dot, as you sit back down on your stool and pour yourself a well-earned cup. You offer one to Minister Meow. He declines, of course. He's more into fish broth. Dot. Still, it's a moment of quiet. Victory. A small, fragrant triumph. Dot, and unlike your invoice book, this one wasn't chewed on by a goat. You've barely had a sip of your reward tea before your quiet is interrupted once again. But this time, it's not an inspector or a market goat or an overzealous poet looking for round two. Dot. It's old General Zhao. He arrives like a breeze from another century. Quiet steps, hands clasped behind his back, eyes half-lidded with the kind of calm you only earn after decades of not dying in battle. He doesn't say hello. He never does. Instead, he nods at your stall, as if to say, you may begin the ceremony. You oblige. You reach for the pu'er, deep, earthy brew as old and dusty as he is, and start the ritual. 2 rinses. 1 long pour. The water steams between you like the haze of some ancient battlefield memory. Zhao settles onto the low stool without a sound, except for the gentle creak of aged joints. Minister Meow, ever the moody aristocrat, takes this as his cue to exit the basket and assume his usual perch near the old man's boots. I had a dream, Zhao murmurs at last. I was back at the Western Garrison. My sword had turned into a kettle. You raise your eyebrows. More useful than a sword these days. He sips. Unless you're brewing trouble. You chuckle. He's been making puns like that for years. This is what you've come to call tea house philosophy hour. No one really knows when it started. Only that Zhao has claimed this hour as his own, always bringing some convoluted parable from his soldiering. Day's tonight's topic, steam. Steam, he declares, tapping his teacup, is the breath of the leaves. You nod solemnly because you've learned not to interrupt his metaphors. It rises, fleeting, like ambition. He waves a hand. Through the air as if catching it, you try to hold it and it disappears. But if you inhale it, savor it, then it becomes part of you. You wonder if that's profound or just mild sleep deprivation. Still, it's comforting, this old general turned philosopher finding meaning in steam and leaves and silence. Historians still argue whether Tang generals like Zhao truly retired to humble lives or whether stories like his were romantic inventions. Some say retired warriors became monks or merchants. Others believe many simply disappeared into the countryside, their stories wrapped in tea-scented myths. But, this one is real. You can smell his stories in every bruise on his knuckles. In every quiet glance at the horizon dot, he tells you about the time he drank yak butter tea on a snow-covered pass. About how he once brewed tea in a soldier's helmet when supplies ran out. About the perfect tea temperature, not too hot, not too cool, just enough to remind your soul it still lives in your body. Tea, Zhao says, pointing a gnarled finger, should never be rushed. That's the mistake the North makes. You're not sure who the North refers to, probably everyone north of his last post, but you agree anyway. Sometimes his visits stretch for hours. Sometimes he speaks in riddles. Once, he recited a love poem to his kettle. But always, always, there's peace in his presence. Like you're sitting with time itself, quietly steeping in memory. Tonight, he falls silent for a while. The market is empty now, save for a few fruit vendors packing up. A child runs past, chasing a wooden wheel. Somewhere, a woman sings an old lullaby about a monkey who stole the emperor's moncake. Zhao lifts his cup again. You know, he says, "This is the best tea I've ever had." You smile. You say that every week. And every week, I mean it. Then slowly he stands. He places a single copper coin on the counter. The same coin he's been paying you with since the beginning. It's too worn to use anymore, but you've never refused it, Dot. As he leaves, you hear him mutter, "Breathe in the steam. Let go of the battle." It might be advice, or a warning, or just a line he remembered from a dream. Either way, you whisper a quiet goodnight, Dot, and Minister Meow, for once, doesn't yowl when the stool is vacated. He simply curls back into his basket with a sigh, as if even he knows that philosophy hour is over. You glance at the remaining tea, still warm, still fragrant. You take another sip, and for a brief, shimmering moment, you swear you taste something more than leaf and water, Dot. Something older, Dot, wiser, Dot, steam. Maybe, Dot, or memory, Dot, or the kind of truth. You can only sip, never speak. The night deepens, but the market isn't quite done with you yet. Just when you think you've earned a stretch and a second helping of sweet lotus bun, a shadow falls across your stall, tall, cloaked and shimmering in fabric unlike any you've ever seen. He doesn't say a word at first, Dot, just peers down at the assortment of tins, tapping his chin with one ring-laden finger. Minister Meow raises his head briefly, sniffs the stranger, then surprisingly doesn't flee. Intriguing. Clear your throat. Looking for something warm? The man blinks, then nods vigorously. Yes, warm, liquid, leaf, Dot, Dot things. Ah, a challenge. His accent is thick somewhere between Persian and Uzbek, with a hint of coastal Chinese tossed in. Like someone tried to brew a language the same way you brew tea, with a few too many ingredients and no strainer. Still, you're used to this. Chang'an is the end of the Silk Road and the beginning of 1,000 strange conversations. Let me guess, you say. You want something refreshing but not too bitter. Scented, perhaps. Reminds you of home? The man lights up. Yes, yes, like goat milk, but better. You blink, then nod slowly. I'll see what I can do. You mix a blend of green tea, dried rose petal, a hint of orange peel, and just a whisper of cardamom. You serve it in your least cracked porcelain cup, placing it before him like a peace offering. He sips, then grins like you've handed him the secret to immortality. You, my leaf wizard, are genius. You stifle a laugh. That'll be 3 coins. He pulls out a pouch that jingles like a festival and spills what looks like Sogdian coins. A few Greek drachmae, something definitely Roman, and oddly a seashell. You select the 3 coins. Closest to round and call it even, Dot, as he drinks. The man launches into a wild tale, something about how his camel once fell in love with a palace goat, which caused a scandal in the shaper, or maybe it was the other way around. His grammar is fluid, Historians still debate the full extent of Sogdian presence in Tang China. Some argue they merely passed through as merchants and translators. Others claim they settled deeply, married locally, and shaped everything from cuisine to court fashion. But sitting here, across from a man in a silver-threaded robe embroidered, with twin peacocks drinking rose tea like it's his birthright, you know where you stand on the matter. The Sogdians are part of the city now. They belong to its mismatched symphony of dialects and spices and improvised stories. Your customer taps the table suddenly. You know, proverb of flying tortoise? You blink. Can't say I do. He leans in. Flying tortoise is wiser than standing horse because tortoise dreams. You try to process that. Right, you nod. Dreaming is important. Very important. He says, also tortoise less noisy. Then, with a final slurp and a dramatic exhale, he rises. I go now, he declares. Time to visit moon-watching pagoda. I hear it plays flute at midnight. You have questions, many questions, but instead, you bow. Safe travels, friend. He bows back, overly deep, almost toppling a nearby basket of yams. Then, with a rustle of silk and clinking coins, he vanishes into the winding streets of Chang'an. You're left with an empty cup, the scent of rose and cardamom, and a renewed appreciation for whatever cosmic madness created the Silk Road. Miao yawns loudly, unimpressed. Still, you smile. Your little tea stall, barely the size of a melon cart, has somehow served warriors, poets, monks, courtesans, inspectors, and now a walking proverb machine from halfway across the world. And the night isn't even over yet. You lean back on your stool and stretch, your spine letting out a series of tiny complaints. The flickering lanterns sway above, throwing long shadows across the tile-patched floor of your tea stall. Most vendors have already shuttered there. Carts and stands, leaving behind a faint scent of sesame oil, fried dough, and the dull hush that only comes when a marketplace exhales. Now begins your least glamorous ritual, the long, deliberate art of cleaning up after a day of controlled chaos. You begin by gathering the lacquered tins ginger, oolong, dried plum, golden bag. Each one gets wiped with a soft cloth and nestled into the polished shelf behind your stall. You do this part slowly, methodically. There's a certain meditative quality to it, like folding clothes, or aligning pebbles along a garden path. You scrape the dregs from your kettle and pour the leftover water into the potted bamboo by the counter. Minister Miao eyes the trickle with disdain, possibly offended you didn't flavor it first. Then comes the ledger. You sit cross-legged behind the counter, lighting a smaller oil lamp that casts a softer, warmer glow than the one overhead. You unfold your cloth-bound account book, ink-stained, tea-splashed, slightly scorched on the corners from that one unfortunate jasmine fire incident last year, and begin to tally the day's take. Let's see. 2 strings of copper cash. From morning regulars, a handful of imperial brass coins. 1 high-quality bolt of silk traded for rare black tea. 3 oddly foreign coins from the Sogdian, which you're mentally converting into miscellaneous. You jot it all down in fine brush script, your handwriting growing progressively messier as your eyes grow heavier. Historians still argue whether Tang Dynasty merchants used any form of double-entry bookkeeping. You'd argue they might have if they weren't so exhausted by nightfall. Then comes the moment of truth. The fudge. Just a little one, maybe you round up the cost of the duck egg pastries that you definitely shared with that courtesan delivery girl. Or perhaps you subtract a few coins for cat expenses. Meow did. After all, heroically knock over a jar of pickled garlic you hated anyway. Still, you keep it honest enough. At least honest enough that if an inspector ever snips again, you won't be arrested, just mildly scolded. The coins are tucked into a hidden compartment beneath the brazier, your humble version of a bank vault. You drape a cloth over it, then another over your knees. The market is quiet now, save for the distant clatter of wooden clogs and the occasional bark of a dog, too. Ambitious for its size, Dot, your fingers trail across a chipped teacup. You hadn't noticed earlier, Dot, it's one you've used since your first month here back, when you barely knew the difference between roasted and steamed leaves, and once mistook chrysanthemum buds for dried shrimp. You still remember the face of the scholar who drank that blend. You take a moment, hold it in both hands. There's comfort in the routine. Every day different, but wrapped in the same structure. Like loose tea leaves shaped by the bowl they steep in the chaos, the small talk, the bribes, the quiet philosophy. None of it could exist without these mundane rituals. You yawn, Dot, then shuffle over to the small sleeping nook behind the stall's bamboo screen. It's not much, just a woven mat, a thin quilt, and the little pillow that smells faintly of ginger and thyme. You light a tiny stick of calming incense lotus, your favorite, and tuck your ledger beneath the pillow like a bureaucratic bedtime story. Minister Meow jumps up beside you, does one dramatic circle, then collapses like a silk dumpling into a fur puddle of satisfaction. Tomorrow, you murmur to him, we're raising prices on that monk who complains about temperature but never tips. He twitches one ear in sleepy approval, Dot, and just as your eyes begin to flutter closed, you hear the distant sound of a flute thin and lilting coming from somewhere above the rooftops. Dot, could it be from the moon-watching pagoda? Maybe your Sogdian friend was telling the truth after all. You smile, and finally, with the moonlight trickling in through the cracks of the stall wall and the incense smoke curling like a lazy dragon, your breathing slows, Dot. It's not glamorous, Dot. It's not the kind of life poets write about, but here, in the heart of Tang Dynasty Chang'an, surrounded by tea leaves, ledgers, legends, and a cat with excellent dramatic instincts, you wouldn't trade it for anything. You don't mean to fall asleep. Not quite yet, but your body disagrees. Still nestled behind the stall, curled up beneath your soft, tea-scented quilt, you hover in that fuzzy in-between place where thoughts drift like mist. Minister Meow purrs, like a sleepy kettle, his warmth pressed to your side. The coals in the brazier give off a gentle orange glow, popping now and then like punctuation marks in the night. Outside, the marketplace has fallen completely still. No more barkers, no more dancers, no more bickering poets trying to rhyme tea with eternity. In your half-dream, you're back in the hills outside Hangzhou, picking tea leaves. Under a wide spring sky, your hands stained green from fresh Camellia sinensis. The sun is warm on your back, and a breeze plays in the sleeves of your robe. Your old master is there, muttering about leaf curvature and infusion times while pretending not to smile. But here in Chang'an, your waking world continues to hum. Quietly in your absence, somewhere in the alleys, a rice seller hums a lullaby to himself as he locks up his cart. A constable's lantern bobbles past your stall, pauses for a heartbeat, then moves on. Maybe he's checking that the tea merchant isn't hiding anything illegal behind the bamboo screens again. You're not. This time, you shift slightly and wince as a coin digs into your side, forgotten in your sash from earlier. You fish it out, squint at it in the dim light. An old Tang coin, square-holed and smooth from passing through hundreds of hands before yours. You place it next to your pillow, as if it might wish you good fortune by morning. Minister Meow lifts his head briefly, then flops down again with a soft thud, completely unbothered by the existential worries that keep humans up at night. You envy him. Eventually, your breathing syncs with his. Deep, slow, rhythmic, Dot. You think about tomorrow, the boiling water, the first customer, the familiar ritual of measuring leaves with practiced precision. But that's tomorrow's rhythm. Tonight, you're steeped in stillness. Historians still argue whether merchants like you ever truly rested, or if sleep was simply a temporary pause in the anxious pacing of survival. But here, in this moonlit cocoon of woven mats and tea-scented air, You'd argue this is rest in its purest form, because even if your stall is modest, your clothes are patched, and your debts are slightly optimistic tonight, you feel full of stories, of motion, of warmth, and of a kind of quiet triumph known only to those who have survived another day in the marketplace. And just before sleep takes you fully, you swear you hear something. Again, that flute, drifting down from a rooftop or a memory or a dream. Maybe you imagine it, or maybe there really is a wandering musician somewhere, playing a lullaby only the tired and honest can hear. Either way, you smile and drift finally entirely into sleep. And now, as the last embers fade in the brazier and Minister Meow snoozes peacefully at your side, let your breath slow. Just a bit more. You've made it through a full day in the Tang Dynasty, bartered with nobles, dodged tax collectors, poured hot water with just the right flick of the wrist, and even survived a spontaneous poetry duel. Not bad for a humble tea merchant. The stalls outside are dark now, their colorful awnings fluttering gently in the late-night breeze. You imagine the scent of sweet osmanthus drifting through the alleys, mixing with the last curls of incense. Smoke from the city's temples. The moon hangs soft and pale over Chang'an, keeping watch over merchants, monks, night guards, and travelers alike. Let yourself feel how heavy your limbs are now. Let the quiet sink in deeper. The worries of the day, the coins, the ledgers, the strange tea preferences can wait. They always do. Right now, there's nothing to do. Nothing to fix. Only stillness. Only that warm, sleepy haze of a world slipping into dreams. So let your mind wander gently, like a lantern floating down the river, light flickering softly against the water. Tomorrow, the kettle will boil again. Tomorrow, the city will stir. But for now, just rest. You're safe, you're warm, and you're exactly where you need to be. Sweet dreams, my friend.